You know, the summer before in 2020, when there was an absolute disaster in this country where riots and burning of federal buildings occur, we saw billions of dollars, multiple deaths occur. Speaker Pelosi, I believe, is culpable with part of this in allowing this, paving the way for the terrible thing to happen on January 6th, to just dismiss America's memory of what happened the summer before. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I apologize if I'm a little out of breath. It's just being old. Thank you all for coming forward. It takes absolute courage, absolute courage. Every damn meeting we have now has Trump derangement syndrome talking to it. This was a dereliction of duty by the Secretary of the Army, who refused, by the way, to come before this committee because he knew his culpability. He knew that he lied and he was derelict in the duty. And I appreciate from the bottom of my heart you guys standing up for the United States of America. You took an oath to it, as did the Secretary, and you're keeping your oath. So I deeply appreciate it at your own personal cost, because we know the weaponization of this government is occurring at an exponential rate, and it's just it is just proof in the pudding that this is what we're dealing with. I swear, why do we not have bipartisan support in getting to the bottom of this is beyond me. It's everything about Trump. Captain Nick, you know, the summer before in 2020, when there was an absolute disaster in this country where riots and burning of federal buildings occur, we saw billions of dollars, multiple deaths occur. Speaker Pelosi, I believe, is culpable with part of this in allowing this, paving the way for the terrible thing to happen on January 6th, to just dismiss America's memory of what happened the summer before. In contrast, the protests at Capitol on January 6th, which we know were all wrong, there was no hesitation in creating a politicized community. And we had a former Republican who saw it as a personal grind to go after President Trump, basically not allowing evidence to come before the committee. It's been more than 3 years, and members of the D.C. National Guard are coming forward with your oath to provide clarity. I'll just ask Captain Nick, in your testimony, you mentioned you were a confidential source for the Select Committee. In addition, you go on to state, my confidentiality was breached to the national media. Would you mind expanding upon that?
Yes, sir. First, I'd like to correct the record from a previous statement from your colleague. When he asked a question about Pentagon officials and their desire to send troops, I said absolutely. I meant they did not at the time want to send troops to the Capitol, just for clarification. I was informally, after January 6th, at some time after, I was informally interviewed by the Select Committee on January 6th. I gave informal testimony and hired counsel from Tully Rickney, Dan Meyer, who's also behind me. After giving my written notes and informal testimony, a couple weeks later, I was contacted by Political from a news outlet, from a writer requesting comment on my handwritten notes they got a copy of. I then contacted Dan, who then contacted the Select Committee to resolve that. But it had to be leaked at some point from probably the Select Committee, because that's the only people I talked to and gave my notes to.
It is obviously evident with anybody with an objective eye that the committee was put forth to tell one thing. If that committee had gone in front of anything in a legal department, you would have cross-examination, other witnesses, et cetera. We never saw any of that to get to the actual truth, which is what all Americans, whether you're which party or not, should believe in doing, period, period. I just want to reiterate something. This is actually, I guess, to Colonel Matthews and General Dean. Turning to the matter of security, Secretary of the Army and McCarthy have said the D.C. National Guard was not prepared for immediate deployment. Do you agree with that statement?
That statement is false. We were prepared in many ways. We even had backup plans. We call them branches and sequels, right? So not only did we have a force that was at Andrews Air Force Base that was training and doing civil disturbance that weekend, prepared to deploy on that day, that was ready to deploy on that day, we also had traffic control points that were at MPD, and those members had riot control gear in the trunk, not visible to the public, but for their self-protection. In case MPD had to respond, they had the appropriate gear to provide civil disturbance, riot control efforts if needed. And so we had the capability, we had the planning, we had the know-how. So the question that I have is, so out of all the events, out of all the inaugurations the District of Columbia National Guard supported, out of all the NATO summits, out of all the IMF protests that we've had, the summer of 2020, COVID, we were not able to respond to this, we're incapable, that's categorically false.
I find it just, my time is short, but I just find it a slap in the face to all the good men and women who serve in our armed forces to say you're not prepared. A slap in the face. And because this guy wanted to save his butt with the hope of getting in the Biden administration, that's point blank what happened. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll yield back.
So the arms dealer that President Biden freed in a prisoner swap, Victor Bout, is now, according to the Wall Street Journal, selling weapons to the Houthis. Does President Biden think that is a problem?
So look, a couple of things. I can't confirm that report today, I believe in the Wall Street Journal. I do want to put out a couple of facts here that is important to note. Look, securing the release of Americans who are being held hostage and wrongfully detained is a big priority, is a priority for this administration. And I would note that we have been extraordinarily successful in getting that done. It is a top priority to get these Americans, again, wrongfully detained and held hostage. And so that is something, and it's not easy. It is not an easy thing to do. It is not, there are some difficult decisions that we have to make. We've been very transparent about that. Very transparent. As you're talking about Victor Bout, that was related to Brittany's release. And so even then, a year and a half ago, we were clear about decisions that have to be made on a number of occasions, and it's incredibly difficult. And we've been transparent about it. We've been very transparent. So look, we're going to continue to do what we can, do everything that we can to bring Americans home who are wrongfully detained and held hostage. And again, frankly, we have had an extraordinary record of doing just that, and that's going to be the president's top priority.
And on this issue of funding, the administration has money to send to Lebanon without Congress coming back. But Congress does have to come back to approve money to send to people in North Carolina. Do I have that right?
Here's what I'm going to be very clear about. The president and the vice president has had a robust whole of government response to this. Hundreds of millions of dollars. I said it at the top, more than $200 million that we have directly put towards survivors here for disaster help. And that's because of this president's commitment to make sure that we are there for communities that are impacted. We take this very seriously again. We take this very seriously. And before the hurricane hit, we pre-positioned more than 1,500 federal folks on the ground to help. And so we have made sure that every state has gotten their storm requested emergency declaration. They requested it, and we made sure they received it. We've taken this very seriously. More than $200 million that we have provided to the impacted areas. But instead, people want to do disinformation, misinformation, which is dangerous. Because then when folks on the ground hear that, they may not want to ask for the help that they need. That is there for them. That's our focus here.
But President Biden is fond of saying, show me your budget and I will tell you what you value. If he's got money for people in Lebanon right now, without Congress having to come back, what does it say about his values? There's not enough money right now for people in North Carolina who need it. That's not misinformation.
Wait, no, that is your whole premise of the question is misinformation, sir. What you don't, yes, it's misinformation.
Is there money to send to Lebanon right now?
I just mentioned to you that we provided more than $200 million to folks who are impacted in the area, and I just shared with you that people are deciding not to. People are deciding not to.
Letter to Congress that there's not enough money to help people in North Carolina.
We're talking about the SBA disaster loan.
That's money for people in North Carolina,
and that's important. And people in North Carolina need that. Wait, this is nothing new. Peter, this is nothing new. Congress comes together, they provide money, millions of dollars, for disaster relief. We're asking them to do the job that they have been doing for some
And I'm reading
time.
from a letter that President Biden
doing
sent to
for
Johnson,
some
McConnell,
time.
Schumer, and Jeffries. The president's letter is not misinformation. Would you agree?
No, the way you're asking me the question is misinformation. There is money that we are allocating to the impacted areas, and there's money there to help people who truly need it. There are survivors who need the funding,
You can't
and
call
it's
a question
there.
that you don't like misinformation.
I said
That's
that,
very
I actually said we have the money available to help survivors of Hurricane Helene and also Hurricane Milton. Now, there's going to be a shortfall, right? Because we don't know how bad Hurricane Milton is going to be. And so we're going to need additional funding.
That's exactly what I just asked about. And you said it was
No.
misinformation.
What
Yes.
you're asking me is why Congress needs to come back and do their job. That's what you're asking me. Congress needs to come back and do their job and provide extra assistance, extra funding to disaster relief fund. That's what Congress needs to do, and we're going to continue to urge that. You may not want that, but that's okay. That's what this president wants, and that's what the vice president wants. Thanks, everybody.